A pregnant woman begs a millionaire goat for leftover food at Christmas, and something unexpected happens. Champagne glasses clinked like bells as snow fell gently outside the panoramic windows of The Edge at Le Bernardin, the most exclusive restaurant in Manhattan's Diamond District. Inside Mars, beneath crystal chandeliers that cost more than most people's homes, Sebastian Goat, Wall Street's most feared hedge fund manager, raised his glass to toast another record-breaking year. "To the extreme!" he roared, his voice cutting through the classical music like a knife. His guests laughed, their jewels reflecting the light as they applauded. Sebastian's smile was sharp, predatory. At 42, he had it all: a billion-dollar empire, a chain of restaurants bearing his name, and a reputation for crushing anyone who dared to plead for mercy. That's when he saw her through the window. A young woman stood outside in the falling snow, one hand pressed against her swollen belly, the other gripping the iron railing of the restaurant entrance. She shivered, her thin coat offering no protection against the biting December wind. Her face was gaunt, hollowed with hunger, but her eyes, those desperate, pleading eyes, were fixed on the comforting warmth inside. Sebastian's jaw clenched. He set the glass down with a dry, clinking sound. "Security," he snapped, his voice so cold it fogged the windows. "Resolve this situation, now." But before the security guard could move, the woman stumbled through the restaurant's revolving door, entering the heated lobby. Drops of water from her coat dripped onto the imported Italian marble. The entire restaurant fell silent, hundreds of eyes fixed on the intruder. "Please," the woman whispered, her voice almost inaudible in the sudden silence. "I'm sorry to interrupt. Her hand moved protectively over her stomach. "I haven't eaten in 2 days. I was wondering if you had any leftovers, something you were going to throw away. I promise I'll be right back." The maitre d' approached to escort her to the exit, but Sebastian rose, dragging his chair across the floor with deliberate slowness. All eyes in the room were on him. He straightened his bespoke Tom Ford suit and walked toward her, his Italian leather shoes clinking with each calculated step. He stopped a meter away, close enough for her to see the disgust in his ice-blue eyes. "Leftovers." His voice was low, but it echoed through the restaurant like a judge delivering a sentence. "You want to eat the garbage from my establishment?" I'm so sorry," she stammered, tears beginning to stream down her hollow cheeks. "I didn't mean to." "Let me say something about leftovers," Sebastian interrupted, a hint of disdain in his voice. He turned to the guests, now introducing himself. "In my restaurants, we don't have leftovers. We have standards, excellence, and we certainly don't feed stray dogs that show up around here." Nervous laughter echoed through the crowd. The woman's face flushed with embarrassment. She took a step back, her hand still clutching her stomach. "Get out of here," Sebastian said categorically, "and never return to any of my properties. You are banished from all 15 properties scattered throughout the city." The woman's legs seemed to give way. She leaned on a nearby table, knocking over an empty wine bottle which shattered on the marble floor. The sound was like a gunshot in the silence. "Please," she whispered one last time, her voice choked with emotion. "My baby, your baby is none of my business." Sebastian's words were surgical, precise, meant to hurt. "Your bad life choices are not my responsibility. Now get out of here before I have you arrested for trespassing." The security guard grabbed her arm, but she broke free, staggering toward the door. As she walked out into the snow, Sebastian returned to his seat, wiping his hands with a napkin as if he had touched something contaminated. "Where were we?" he said excitedly, raising his glass again. "Aha, yes, in excess." But the toast died in his throat, because the woman hadn't left. She had collapsed on the sidewalk outside, her body crumbling in the snow like a broken doll. Through the window, Sebastian watched a small crowd begin to gather around her motionless body. His blood ran cold. "Someone call 911, his assistant, Marcus said urgently, picking up the phone. Sebastian's hand reached out quickly, grabbing Marcus's wrist. "Don't do that. But sir, she is—" "I told you not to do that." Sebastian's voice was low, menacing. But inside, his heart was pounding. Outside, a man in the crowd had already called emergency services. Sebastian watched as two people helped the woman sit up. She was barely conscious, her head resting on someone's shoulder. "Go back to dinner," Sebastian ordered his guests, but no one moved. They all watched the scene unfold, with expressions that mixed discomfort and morbid curiosity. Then the woman's eyes opened. Through the window, above the falling snow and the warm glow of the restaurant lights, her gaze met Sebastian's. There was no anger in those eyes, no hatred, only a deep, infinite sadness. And something else, something that made her heart stop. Recognition. His cell phone vibrated in his pocket. He pulled it out with trembling fingers, seeing a message from an unknown number. Check your email. Look at the attachment. Then, look at her face again. What he saw next would shatter everything he thought he knew. Sebastian's throat went dry. His hands, which suddenly wouldn't stop trembling, opened his email application. The most recent message had no subject, just an attachment, a photograph. He clicked. The image showed a young couple in front of a hospital, both beaming with joy. The woman held a newborn baby wrapped in a blue blanket. But Sebastian barely saw the baby. He was staring intently at the man in the photo, his arm around the woman's shoulders, his face lit up with happiness. It was him, 7 years younger, with a gentler gaze, but unmistakably him. And the woman in the photo, the woman holding her child, was the woman who was dying in the snow outside his restaurant. The phone slipped from Sebastian's fingers, falling with a thud onto the table. The words exploded in his mind like bombs. "That's Emma. That's my son. That's the life I destroyed. Sir." Marcus's voice seemed to come from very far away. "Are you all right, sir?" But Sebastian couldn't speak. He couldn't breathe. Emma Reeves, medical student. They met 7 years ago, dated secretly for 3 months. When she told him she was pregnant, his father found out and dealt with the situation with his characteristic cruelty, an agreement, a confidentiality agreement, and orders for Emma to disappear to California. Sebastian had signed the papers. He had convinced himself that he had no choice. He had buried the guilt so deeply that he had almost forgotten it. But now she was there, hungry, carrying another child, and he simply threw her out on the street as if she were trash. "Oh my God," Sebastian whispered, staggering to his feet. "What have I done?" He burst through the restaurant doors, into the frigid night air, his expensive coat forgotten inside. The crowd around Emma parted as he passed, kneeling in the mud beside her. "Emma," he said, his voice breaking as he pronounced her name. "Emma, it's me. It's Sebastian." Her eyes snapped open, unfocused. "I know who you are," she whispered. "Everyone knows Sebastian Goat now." In the distance, sirens blared, drawing ever closer. Sebastian's hands hovered over her, afraid to touch her, afraid that contact would make the nightmare real. "The baby," he said desperately. "Our baby. Where?" "Dead." The word hit him like a punch to the gut. Sophia. She died at 3 years old. Her lawyers made sure I couldn't access the money when Sophia got sick. They said it violated the terms of the agreement. They said that if I tried to contest it, they would confiscate the trust fund completely. Her laughter was like shattering glass. Then I watched my daughter die, knowing that her father had millions of dollars and wouldn't spend a penny to save her. "That's not true," Sebastian exclaimed, breathless. I would never do that." "You did it. Maybe you didn't know, maybe your father planned it this way, but the result is the same. Sophia is dead, and you killed her." The ambulance arrived, its red lights painting the snow with arterial hues. The paramedics rushed in with a stretcher, but before they could lift it, Emma gripped Sebastian's wrist with surprising force. "I came here tonight because I heard you donated $5 million to a children's hospital. I thought," she laughed again, bitterly, "I thought maybe you'd changed. Maybe the man I loved 7 years ago was still out there somewhere. But I was wrong. You're just a monster in an expensive suit." "Let me help now," Sebastian pleaded, as the paramedics placed her on the stretcher. "Please, let me help." Emma's voice grew weaker as they carried her toward the ambulance. "You can't help people like me. You proved that tonight. You can only help those who already have everything." The ambulance doors slammed shut between them. Sebastian knelt in the blood-soaked snow, watching the vehicle drive away, its sirens fading into the Manhattan night. Behind him, his guests scattered across the sidewalk, their faces pale under the streetlights. Some filmed with their cell phones. By morning, this would be everywhere. The viral video of Sebastian Goat throwing a pregnant woman into the street on Christmas Eve. But Sebastian didn't care about that. All he could see in his mind was Sophia's face, a face he had never actually seen, a daughter he had never held, a child who had died because of his cowardice. Marcus appeared beside him, holding Sebastian's coat. "Sir, we need to get you inside. You're freezing." "No." Sebastian's voice was hoarse. "I need you to find out where they're taking her, now." "Sir, and cancel my schedule, all of it, indefinitely." Sebastian stood up, his legs trembling. Drops of water dripped from his clothes onto the sidewalk. "Cancel the rest of tonight's dinner. Refund everyone. Tell them we're closed." Marcus's eyes widened. "For how long? Until I figure out how to stop being the man who killed his own daughter." He had no idea that the truth was even worse than he imagined. Inside Mount Sinai Hospital, Emma Reeves lay in a bed in the obstetrics ward, connected to monitors that emitted reassuring beeps. The baby was fine. She was fine, or would be, once they administered fluids and nutrients. But well was a relative term when you had lost everything. A nurse adjusted her IV drip, smiling with professional compassion. "You're very lucky. A few more hours in this cold and, well, let's just say you're lucky. Is there anyone we can call for you?" Emma shook her head. There was no one there. Her parents had disowned her when she first became pregnant. Her friends from medical school had distanced themselves after Sophia's death, bothered by her grief. The father of this baby had disappeared the moment he found out she was homeless. She was alone. She had been alone for a long time. The door opened. Emma had expected another nurse, but instead, Sebastian Goat stood in the doorway, looking somehow smaller than when he was at the restaurant. His hair was disheveled, his $1,000 suit wrinkled and stained with mud. He was holding a paper bag from a delicatessen, steam rising from the top. "I brought soup," he said softly. "Real soup, not hospital food." Emma's heart, which had been beating steadily on the monitor, suddenly raced. The machine emitted an urgent beep. "Get out of here." His voice was tired, but firm. "Emma, please, just leave me alone." "I told you to leave." She reached for the call button, trembling. "Or I'll call security to have you removed from here." "I'm sure you remember how it works." Sebastian shuddered as if she had hit him. Even so, he went into the room and closed the door behind him. "I deserve this. I deserve worse. But please, just give me 5 minutes. Why should I?" "Because I found out what my father did." Sebastian's voice faltered. "The trust fund, the restrictions. I reviewed all the paperwork tonight. My father planned it all this way on purpose. If you tried to access the money before Sophia turned 18, you'd lose everything. It was a trap, a way to punish her for getting pregnant." Emma's hand froze on the call button. "I already know that." "But I didn't know. I swear to God, I didn't know." Sebastian approached, his eyes red from crying. "I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought the money would protect you both. But my father, he made sure it would only hurt you. And you never checked, never called, never asked if we were okay." Emma's voice was cold. "Your ignorance doesn't absolve you, Sebastian. It only makes you even more guilty. You're right." Sebastian placed the soup on the wheeled tray. "I was a coward. I let my father control my life. And when he died 3 years ago, I didn't become a better person. I became him. I built an empire based on his principles, ruthlessness, cruelty, indifference to anyone who couldn't benefit me." He pulled a chair closer to her bed and sat down heavily. On the table between them, he placed a thick brown paper folder. "What is that?" Emma asked, her voice thick with suspicion. "Proof." Sebastian opened the folder, revealing page after page of legal documents. "These are the original trust fund documents. See here." He pointed to a clause hidden within the dense text. "This provision was added by my father's lawyers without my knowledge. It specifically prohibits early withdrawal for medical expenses." Emma held her breath. She had spent 2 years believing that Sebastian had planned everything this way, a final act of cruelty from the man who had abandoned her. But what if she was wrong? Here's the account statement, Sebastian continued, pulling out another document. The fund had $150,000 when Sophia got sick, an increase from the initial $50,000, more than enough to pay for her treatment, but you couldn't touch that money. Stop, Emma's voice faltered. Stop showing me what could have saved her. I can't look at it. Sebastian closed the folder, his hands trembling. I'm not showing you this to hurt you. I'm showing you this because you deserve to know the truth. My father was a monster, and I was too weak to stand up to him, but I'm not that person anymore, or I don't want to be. Words are easy. Emma wiped the tears from her face. Sophia's father also made promises. Everyone does. Then let me show you with actions. Sebastian leaned forward, his voice urgent. Stay at my house, 6 bedrooms, and I barely use 3. I'll hire the best obstetrician in town. I'll make sure you have everything you need. Medical care, food, clothes, everything necessary to keep you and the baby healthy. In exchange for what? Nothing. No commitments. No contracts. Sebastian's voice lowered to almost a whisper. If you want me to leave, I will. But if you let me be there when this baby is born, if you give me a chance to be the father I should have been for Sophia, I promise I will never abandon any of you again. Emma wanted to say no. She wanted to protect herself from the inevitable disappointment. But then something changed in Sebastian's expression, something raw and fragile that she recognized because she saw it in the mirror every day. Way, you never even asked her name, Emma said quietly. 7 years, and you never once asked what name I gave our daughter. Sebastian's face contorted in an expression of disgust. I know. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Sophia Grace Reeves, she had her eyes. Ice blue. People always commented on them. Emma's hand went to her belly. She loved strawberries and hated carrots. She wanted to be a veterinarian when she grew up. She died holding my hand, asking why it hurt so much, and I couldn't tell her it was because her father's money could have saved her. But his lawyers wouldn't let me keep it. Each word was like a stab. Sebastian bent forward, his forehead almost touching his knees, his whole body trembling with sobs. I'm sorry, he said, breathless. I'm so sorry, Emma, I'm so sorry. They sat in silence for a long moment, the only sounds being the beeping of the monitors and Sebastian's heavy breathing. Finally, Emma spoke. 1 month. Sebastian raised his head abruptly. What? You have 1 month to prove you're serious. You offer housing and medical assistance, but you can't pretend we're a family. You're just someone helping. That's all. Her voice hardened. And if you act like the man who kicked me out of your restaurant tonight, I'm leaving. No second chances. Understand? Understood. Sebastian stood up, hope and terror conflicting in his eyes. Thank you, Emma. I won't let you down. You've done this before, several times. Emma's gaze was unwavering. But this baby deserves a better chance. So, I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing this for them. As he left the hospital room, Sebastian stopped at the door. Emma, what name would you have given this baby if things were different? Emma remained silent for so long that he thought she wouldn't answer. Then, if it's a boy, James, if it's a girl, Hope. Hope. The word echoed in Sebastian's mind as he walked through the hospital corridors. He had spent 7 years building an empire without hope, without love, without anything that mattered. But perhaps, just perhaps, it wasn't too late to build something real. In the parking lot, Marcus waited beside the car, holding Sebastian's cell phone. "Sir, you have 73 missed calls. The video is everywhere. Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. Millionaire throws pregnant woman into the street on Christmas Eve. It's the most talked about subject in the whole world." Sebastian picked up his phone and scrolled through his notifications. His board of directors had called an emergency meeting. 3 major investors had already pulled out. The mayor's office had issued a statement condemning him. His restaurants were being bombarded with negative reviews, driving them to bankruptcy. His empire was crumbling. Everything he had built was turning to ashes. "Great," said Sebastian, and he meant it. Marcus blinked. "Sir, I built this empire on cruelty. Let it burn." Sebastian got into the car. "Tomorrow morning, I want you to do 3 things. First, liquidate my entire stock portfolio. Put the money into an irrevocable trust fund for Emma and the baby." "Sir, that's over $200 million. Secondly," Sebastian continued, as if Marcus hadn't spoken, "find out who drafted that clause in Sophia's trust fund. I want names. And then I want our lawyers to file a lawsuit against my father's estate for wrongful death." Marcus was speechless. "You're going to sue your own father's estate? He killed my daughter. Someone needs to answer for this." Sebastian's voice was firm. "And third, and this is the most important, I want you to create a foundation, the Sophia Grace Foundation. It will fund cancer treatments for children whose families cannot afford them. We will fund it with what remains of my father's inheritance after the trial." "Sir," Marcus's voice was soft, "are you sure about all of this?" Sebastian looked out the window at the snow-covered city. Somewhere in that hospital, Emma was preparing to give him a chance he absolutely didn't deserve. And somewhere in heaven, if such a place exists, a little girl named Sophia watched her father finally do something right. I've never been so sure of anything in my entire life. 2 weeks later, on a cold January morning, Sebastian was in his living room, watching Emma come down the stairs. She moved slowly, one hand on the banister, the other on her belly. She looked healthier now, rosy cheeks, regaining weight. Dr. Morrison had said the baby was developing very well. "Good morning," Sebastian said cautiously. They had established a routine over the past 14 days. He prepared breakfast. She ate in silence. He went to his office to deal with the ongoing collapse of his public reputation. She rested or read in the library. They existed in the same space, but remained strangers. "Good morning," Emma replied, sitting down in a chair at the dining table. Sebastian served her scrambled eggs, toast, and fresh fruit, foods that Dr. Morrison had recommended. "I have a meeting today," Sebastian said, serving her orange juice. "With the Foundation's lawyers. We're finalizing the structure of Sophia's fund." Emma looked up sharply. "Are you really doing this?" "I told you I would do it. People tell me a lot of things." But there was something different in his voice. It wasn't confidence, not yet, but perhaps the beginning of a belief. Sebastian sat down opposite her. "Emma, can I ask you something?" She nodded cautiously. "When you came to the restaurant that night, you said you'd heard about my donation to the children's hospital. How did you know I'd be there?" Emma was silent for a moment, stirring the eggs on her plate. "I've followed your career for 7 years. I know where you live, where you work, which restaurants you own. I know everything about you, Sebastian, because I needed to know that the man who abandoned his daughter was suffering, that he wasn't happy, that karma existed. And what did you discover? You were exactly what I imagined you would become. Rich, successful, alone." Emma stared at him. "But when I read about that $5 million donation, something changed. I thought maybe—" She laughed bitterly. "I thought maybe you had changed. That maybe, if I showed up and reminded you of what you lost, you would help me save this baby, save the one you could still protect. So you planned everything, coming to the restaurant on Christmas Eve. I planned to call for help. I didn't plan to faint." Emma's hand moved protectively over her stomach. I hadn't eaten in 3 days. I was weaker than I thought. Sebastian felt something snap in his chest. You almost died testing whether I was still human. And you failed the test. Emma's voice was soft but sharp. You proved to be exactly the monster I thought you were. But then, she gestured around the house, then you did this. And I don't know what to believe anymore. Before Sebastian could answer, the doorbell rang. Marcus appeared, coming from the office. Sir, Dr. Morrison is here to examine Miss Reeves. The appointment was routine, checking the baby's heartbeat, measuring Emma's vital signs, and ensuring everything was progressing normally. Sebastian waited downstairs, pacing back and forth in the living room, until he heard Dr. Morrison's voice calling from the top of the stairs. "Mr. Goat, could you come here, please?" His heart stopped. Something was wrong. He climbed the stairs 2 steps at a time, bursting into Emma's room and finding her sitting on the bed, tears streaming down her face. "What is it?" Sebastian asked. "What's wrong?" Dr. Morrison smiled. "There's nothing wrong with it. But I thought you two would like to hear this together." She placed the Doppler on Emma's belly, and suddenly the room filled with sound, a rapid, rhythmic beat reminiscent of galloping horses. "That's your baby's heartbeat," said Dr. Morrison. strong and healthy, and if you listen carefully, Marta, she moved the Doppler slightly. There are 2 heartbeats. The world stopped spinning. 2, Emma whispered. Twins, fraternal twins, judging by the ultrasound. Congratulations. Dr. Morrison put away her equipment, still smiling. I'll give you 2 a minute. She left. The room fell silent, except for the distant echo of twin heartbeats. Emma stared at her belly, a mixture of awe and terror on her face. Twins? I can barely support one. How am I going to manage? You're not alone. The words came out before Sebastian could stop them. Emma, you're not going through this alone. I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. She looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time since that night at the restaurant. Why? Why are you doing all this? Is it guilt? Is it to improve your public image? Because if that's all it is, it's because I'm tired of being dead inside. Sebastian's voice faltered. For 7 years, I was a ghost. I had everything and felt nothing. But that night, when I saw you collapse, when I realized what I had done, he moved closer, kneeling beside the bed. I felt something again. Pain, regret, sadness, and it hurt terribly, but at least I was feeling something. At least I was alive again. Emma's tears were now falling faster. I don't know if I can forgive you. I'm not asking you to do this. I'm just asking you to let me be here. Let me help raise these babies. Let me be the father I should have been for Sophia. Sebastian's own tears came now, hot and bitter. I can't bring her back, but maybe I can honor her memory by being better, by being the person she deserved to have as a father. For a long moment, Emma said nothing. Then, slowly, she reached out and took his hand. It was the first time they had intentionally touched each other since that night, 7 years ago. Okay, she whispered. Okay. But Sebastian, if you break that promise, if you abandon those babies the way you abandoned Sophia, I'll make sure you regret it for the rest of your life. If I do that, I'll deserve everything you do for me. Sebastian squeezed her hand gently. But I won't. I swear on Sophia's memory, I won't. Outside, the snow began to fall again, covering the city in white. Inside the house, 2 heartbroken people sat together, holding hands, listening to the echo of twin heartbeats that represented something neither of them had felt in years. Have hope. 3 months later, on a hot April morning, Emma went into labor. Sebastian drove her to the hospital, his hands gripping the steering wheel tightly, his heart pounding so hard he thought it would burst. In the delivery room, he held Emma's hand as she screamed and pushed, while the doctors encouraged her and the nurses monitored her, while the world was reduced to this single moment, this single chance for redemption. The first cub was born at 6:47 a.m. A boy, James Richard Goat, named after a grandfather he never knew, but whose legacy of cruelty ended today. The second cub was born 12 minutes later. A girl, Hope Sophia Goat, named after the sister she would never know, but whose memory would guide her forever. Holding his daughter for the first time, feeling her tiny fingers curl around his thumb, Sebastian thought of Sophia, the child he had never held, never met, never saved, and he made a promise to her. I will be better. For them, for Emma, for you. I will spend the rest of my life being the father you deserved. Emma watched from her hospital bed, exhausted and emotional, as Sebastian cradled their daughter. You're crying, she observed softly. I never knew, Sebastian whispered, his voice choked with tears. I never knew you could love someone so much that it hurts physically. I never knew what I was missing. Now you know. Emma held out her hand, and Sebastian carefully placed Hope in his arms, then sat down beside them with James. So don't waste her. I won't go, Sebastian promised. Never again. Through the hospital window, New York City stretched to the horizon. Millions of people living their lives, pursuing their dreams, making their mistakes. Among them, a man who had once been a monster had transformed into something else. Not a saint, not a hero, but perhaps, finally, a father. And in a world that often forgot to offer second chances, this was a miracle in its own way. Sometimes, The people we hurt the most are the ones who save us. Sebastian Goat lost everything, his reputation, his empire, his soul, before finding the only things that truly mattered: love, family, and the courage to change. The Sophia Grace Foundation continues to fund cancer treatment for underprivileged children, ensuring that no parent has to watch their child die for lack of money. Because some legacies are built on cruelty, but others are built on redemption. In the end, the only legacy that matters is the one we leave in the hearts of those we love. Wait, before you scroll, hit subscribe so you never miss the stories that hit your soul.